Morning sunshines, welcome back. Today is part 2 of our wedding cake tutorial, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful sugar magnolia. So if you're interested, keep watching. So here's a list of some of the ingredients and tools that you're going to need. We're going to start off with some cornstarch. You'll need gum paste and fondant. To make the sugar magnolia, we're going to use a 50-50 combination. So that's 50% gum paste, 50% fondant. Also going to need some floral tape, a fondant roller, and a silicone mat. Some flower wire. I use 22 gauge in this video, but you can go thicker if you have that kind of wire. You're going to need a fondant ball tool, a small offset spatula, some piping gel, a hot cocoa bomb mold, or if you have an apple tray like from your local grocery store, you can totally use that too. Some edible gold paint and a paint palette to obviously put your paint in. A skinny or fine tip paintbrush, a 2-inch cookie cutter that's circular obviously, and a Wilton fondant cutter. It's called Narrow Orchid, and you can find this pretty much at any of your like Hobby Lobby or Ben Franklin stores that you have in your area. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is grab your 50-50 mixture of gum paste and fondant. You don't want a huge ball, so I would say the size of a gum ball. And then you're just going to use your hands and create like a cone. And then once you have your cone, you're going to grab your 22 gauge flower wire. And right here I bent it in half. It's about 6 inches long, maybe 7 inches long. I bent it in half and created a little hook at the edge of the wire. So we're going to apply a little bit of piping gel and then stick it into the middle of our cone. Just about halfway, and then once it's in, you're just going to pinch this closed to form around the wire. Alright, and we're going to use our little mini spatula from Wilton, and we're going to create vertical lines all the way around the bud. And now that we have our vertical lines, we can start cutting. So we're just going to take our scissors and insert it about halfway and make a snip. And we're going to do that all the way around the same height. Okay, and once you made those snips, just bend these little guys backwards. Then we're going to go up to the next row, and you're going to cut right between these two snips, right between the first two snips, and work your way all the way around. And you're going to do this all the way up to the center of this middle part of the flower. Just make sure that you're bending these little guys backwards and over so that they curl, because that'll give it the effect that we are looking for. And there is the center of our magnolia. Alright, so I had a little bit of an audio issue here, but right now I'm rolling out my 50-50 mixture of gum paste and fondant, and I'm going to use my 2-inch cookie cutter to cut out 9 circles. And these are going to be my petals for my magnolia, and I'm cutting out 9 just in case one of my petals either break or something goes wrong with it. And if you're wondering, I'm rolling these to about a 1/16 of an inch thick. You can go thicker. I just made it that thin so that when I roll out the petals, they are nice and thin and more realistic looking. If you go thicker, the petals might look a little fake, if that makes sense. So just beware of the thickness, and you can play around with the thickness if you have extra petals like I did here. And once I cut out my circles, I rolled half of the petal thin and I left the other half thicker. That way I can insert my wire into that. And then once I roll out that petal thin enough to where I want it, I use my ball tool and just soften up the edges to give it a more realistic look. Then I'll place the petal into a cocoa bomb mold and let it dry and harden overnight. Now this part isn't totally necessary, but I think it really gives the sugar magnolia a pop. Here I'm creating little small flower buds, and I'm just using my flower gauge wire, the 22 gauge, and making little tiny buds, just rolling it out into teardrops. And then this is also where that wilted narrow orchid cutter tip comes in. So I'm just using that. I'm cutting it in half, and I'm creating long skinny petals, and this is just going to bring your flower to life. Also put these long skinny petals in the hot cocoa bomb molds as well, just to harden up. Alright, and now is where we bring in that edible gold paint and our skinny fine tipped paintbrush. So we're going to dip our paintbrush into the gold paint and gently, and I mean gently, paint each of the little spikes that are coming out of this flower bud. And because we were so delicate in cutting each of those little triangles, you really want to be careful because they will break off easily if you are not careful. And while you're painting, you really want to make sure that you get into every nook and cranny of this bud. That way you can get the full effect and you don't see those little white spots at the end. Alright, and this might be obvious to some, but it might not be obvious to others. When you are painting this vertical part of the bud, you want to make sure that you are painting up and down. If you start making crisscross and horizontal strokes, it's really going to show when the paint dries. So make sure you're doing vertical strokes only on this part of the flower. And now it's time to assemble. So we're going to take our first petal and bend it 90 degrees with the wire so that it fits nicely underneath this bud. Then we're going to take our floral tape and carefully wrap it around the 2 wires. That way it creates a stronger single wire. Then we're going to take our second petal, do the same thing, bend it 90 degrees, and then we're going to connect it to our first petal and that center bud. When you're attaching the floral wire, you want to make sure that you kind of give it a pull, that way it activates that stickiness in the floral tape. We're going to take our third petal, bend it 90 degrees, and then we're going to attach it kind of making like the petals in thirds. So we have one on the top, one on the bottom, one on the side. And that's going to be the first layer of our magnolia, the first inner layer of our magnolia. And then again, once the petals are set, we're going to wrap it with our floral tape. We're then going to offset the next layer by adding 3 more petals between each of those petals in the first inner layer. So for this magnolia, I used 8 petals just because of the way I wanted it to sit on my second tier of my cake. But once it was all taped up and it formed a single stem, I dried it actually on a paper towel roll, like right in the center where the hole is. I stuck the stem in there, and that was a perfect little area where my flower could dry. But that is it for this video. If you guys liked it, please, please, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to be posting part 3 of this wedding cake tutorial next week. So make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you don't miss that upload. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have an awesome day. God bless, guys. I'll see you in my next video.